بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين إلى يوم الدين أما بعد ما سأل أحد Hazrat Mughira ibn Shu'ba radiyallahu anhu said, there was nobody else who asked the Nabi of Allah more about Dajjal than myself. مَا يَضُرُّكَ مِنْهُ, that he will not harm you. So you asking, O Messenger of Allah, لأنهم يقولون إن معه جبل خبز ونهر ماء. O Nabi of Allah, he said that you will have with him a mountain of bread, a river full of water. He will have with him a mountain of bread, a river full of water. To console the Nabi, to console the Sahabi, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam told him, هُوَ أَهْوَنُ عَلَى اللَّهِ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. Dajjal is far too worthless and insignificant near Allah to allow him to deceive the believers. In another riwayah, وَإِنَّ قَبْلَ خُرُوجِ الدَّجَّالِ ثَلَاثَ سَنَوَاتٍ شِدَادٍ. Before the appearance of Dajjal, there will be 3 difficult years. يُصِيبُ النَّاسَ فِيهَا جُوءٌ شَدِيدٌ. People will suffer from severe famine. يَأْمُرُ اللَّهُ السَّمَاءَ فِي السَّنَةِ الْأُولَى أَن تَحْبِسَ ثُلُثَ مَطَرِهَا. So Allah will command the sky to withhold 1/3 of its rain and the earth to withhold 1/3 of its produce. In the second year, 2/3 of rain, 2/3 of produce. In the third year, it will withhold all the rain. So a time will come, فَلَا تَقْطُرْ قَطْرَةٌ وَيَأْمُرُ الْأَرْض, that not a single drop of water will fall and the earth will hold its produce. فَلَا تُنْبِتُ خَضْرًا, not a single thing will grow. So different ahadith as a ni'mah and bounty have been relayed to us so that we could take lesson, we could turn to Allah, we could value deen, value akhirah, value all the bounties of Allah. Allama ibn Qayyim has mentioned أَعْظَمُ النِّعَمِ, amongst the greatest bounties which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can favor a person is إقبال على الله والتعبد له وانقضاء إليه والتبتل إليه. The fact that a person is turning to Allah, worshipping Allah, dedicating himself to Allah, surrendering himself to Allah, submitting to Allah. وَلَا نِعْمَةَ أَعْظَمْ مِنْ هَذِهِ النِّعْمَةِ. There isn't a greater bounty. Sady has mentioned that there isn't a greater bounty من نعمة الدين التي هي مادة الفوز والسعادة الأبدية, which is the basis and the foundation of success and salvation eternally. So there isn't a greater bounty than this deen. We have the signs in front of us, the alamat are in front of us. We need to make a concerted effort to prepare for death, to prepare for akhirat, to prepare for all the signs which Nabi alayhi salam has warned us. Batil and the systems of Dajjal and the Dajjali systems may be in motion, and the powers that be, the Masons, the New World Order gurus are not on your side. They're not there to support you. They're not there to help you. They've got their agendas. You could be doing good, they'll make you look bad. You could be a hero, they'll make you a villain. You'll want to do things, you will want to oppose their ideologies, but they will use all their weapons in their armory to make you a criminal, to portray you as a outlaw. So their agendas, they control the different platforms, the media, etc. And no matter what, we should remember definitely Allah is with us, but when we do things we should do it with wisdom and hikmah, otherwise that effort will be short-lived. Bi-idhnillah, Allah knows best. So he said there was a visitor in a small town and he was on the main street when a wild dog suddenly leaped out and attacked a young, small, innocent child. So without worrying about his safety, he instinctively ran in that direction, grabbed the dog off the boy and throttled the dog with his bare hands. So it so happened that there was a reporter from a local newspaper who witnessed the entire incident, and he went to this person, shook his hand and made him a hero, and he said, I need to put this in the newspaper with a headline. What headline? He said, brave, heroic local man saves innocent child by killing a vicious beast. So the man said, but I'm not from this town. So the boss said, no problem, don't stress about it. We'll change the headlines. We'll make it American veteran saves innocent child by killing vicious beast. So the man said, by the matter of fact, I'm actually not from the US. I'm from the Middle East. I'm from the Middle East. So again, in shock, the reporter looked at him and glared at him and said, okay, then we'll have to change the headline. Merciless terrorist slays innocent family pet with his bare hands. So that's the mindset, that's the outcome of these Satanists, if we can call them, these people who have these warped ideologies. So Nabi alayhi salatu wassalam has warned us 1400 years ago, eschatology, which is the field of discussing the end of the world, the end of times. Even in the scientific world, they discuss the ultimate fate of the universe, whether it's a big erupt, the big crunch, the big bounce, the big freeze, the global catastrophe, the global apocalypse, the global human extinction, etc., etc. That is their discussions. But we are saying is, we will definitely see the words of Nabi alayhi salatu wassalam. Allah protect us from seeing it, for those times will be very difficult and severe times. So a resistance to this new world order system. So with regards to the riwayah and controlling and taking control over the water supply and food supplies. So the UN Secretary General now recently warned of a hurricane of hunger and a global food system meltdown in the wake of this crisis, of these wars that are taking place. So he said, whether it's food, whether it's fuel, whether it's fertilizer, all these things are skyrocketing, it's disrupted, and shame, the poorest will be hard hit, and global unrest is at our doorstep. But if you look at an independent study from the International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food Systems, there is currently sufficient food. There is no risk of global food supply shortages. Now there is some systems have been in play, which when we will mention it inshallah, but what they've done is they've inherently manipulated and speculated on the food shortages, food commodities, the global flawed food system. So this is to serve the interests of these agribusiness traders at the expense of humanity. So if we look at the conflict currently now, it's a geopolitical issue where the US is literally engaging in a proxy war against Russia and Europe. Why? Because they want to separate Europe from Russia. So imposing sanctions on Russia to harm Europe will make Europe dependent on the US. Must remember and go back down in history. And we don't need to go into detail, but the pages of history bears testimony to this. So these sanctions are to prevent Europe and the other allies of increasing trade and investment with Russia and China. And remember, if there is a marrying between these parties here, both sides, the economies will be bolstered and will strengthen. And NATO itself is part of this doctrine to control. So if we see in the 1980s, so the US to maintain and to strengthen themselves, they needed to undermine Russia, undermine China, and weaken Euro. So from the beginning, the Nord Stream 2 project, the US wanted to monopolize it, they couldn't, so they attempted to block it. And if we don't know much details about Nord Stream, these are gas pipelines in Europe that run under the Baltic Sea from Russia to Germany. So you get the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, which is near Finland, and the Nord Stream 2 pipeline near Estonia. So these pipelines run, and each pipeline consists of two lines with around 100,000 pipes, each pipe which is around 12 meters long. So after the invasion, now this entire project is rendered null and void. So the sanctions. Now can we imagine how much work went into this? If we look at Nord Stream 1, it's around 1,222 kilometers in length, and it was the longest subsea pipeline in the world, which it even surpassed the Norway-UK pipeline. But the Nord Stream 2 now, which is the longest, 1,234 kilometers. If we see the amount of gas that is pumped, the figures is phenomenal, it's humongous. So Russia and China, even if they had to move away from the dollar, the control of oil and gas is still in dollars, and that's very important for the US to maintain that. But if they get them out of the picture, then the US, before the sanctions, it was part of the play out. So they dividing the world into two blocks, and a new Cold War. So US and Europe on one side, China and Russia on the other side. So China was getting too strong, firstly. Secondly is, if Europe now and secondly Russia. So Europe and the relationship and the dependency had to get stronger. That would push the US out of the global picture. So they needed to sever their ties, and then they need to break each country down. So obviously Europe would be devastated by the energy crisis, by the food pricing crisis, and prices would increase, etc. So these major crises hedged and fixed by the US to spike commodity prices is part of the planning to trap countries, to make them dependent and get into debt. So if we go back maybe around 50 years, 1973, so when the gold standard came into place, Henry Kissinger, he manipulated and he came up with a plan. So between the Arab-Israeli war, the energy crisis, this was part of the plan. The US was literally bankrupt. The war in Vietnam, and Germany and Japan were in the forefront of economically becoming superpowers. So part of the plan was to secure the OPEC oil prices, and this secured profits for any Anglo-American companies, and wherever they had put themselves in risk, wherever they had over leveraged regards to the North Sea oil. So they wanted to, part of the plan was to cement the petrodollar system, and the petrodollar system is key. And if you do research, information is out there. So this petrodollar system of the Saudis, and where African nations now became dependent and became in debt. So the high prices of oil was aimed at hurting Europe, Japan, the developing world. Now again, there is a war, but war on all levels, and the world needs to remain dependent on the US and their financial institutions, and that's where the World Bank comes, that's where the IMF comes. So through these policies, they're not really bothered how many hundreds of millions will suffer through poverty, suffer to hunger, prices. You can remember when they do something, they got experts on the table and they forecast the next 10 years, and they iron out issues, and it's a plan, it's a domino effect. So we want A, B, C, D to happen. If it's not going to happen by B, then we need to place this strategy in place. If it's going to spoil plan C, then we need to do this in place. So the next A to Z planning and plotting, and whatever is going to impede their progress, the ball comes in motion. So we'll see energy prices increasing, US companies will benefit, exports, the potential which Russia is supposed to benefit now will go to the US. Then on the food side, from agriculture, etc., the US companies, whether it's wheat, whether it's which energy sources, whether it's commodities, etc., the US now will dominate over other countries because there's a firstly shortage, so they'll get maximum prices, and secondly is they've got supply. So this entire food and debt crisis has been engineered, and when countries go into debt, then they privatize, they sell off their assets to service their debts, and this puts countries into a bigger slavery. So if the America in that era control people through slavery, now it's on a global level, they control you. Doesn't matter what your color, creed, background is, it's just a global level of slavery. Go back now into COVID and the COVID relief loans. So in an Oxfam review, if you see it, the loans to 33 African countries, and the debt of these poor countries, repayments was around $43 billion, which is just a small amount. Then 43 of the 55 African Union members, they had to face expenditures, cuts, it's around 183 billion. So to make the problem worse, they had the lockdown, which triggered unprecedented global debt. So these debts, and obviously dollar denominated, strengthens the US dollar, it strengthens the leverage of the US. So this is a new world order, and at any initiative like China launched the Belt Road Initiative. So that was where China had paved the way globally to secure their dominance. So between the structures that have started, the IMF, the World Bank, etc., put countries into debt and controlling global markets, controlling supply chains, and part of these players, obviously you've got brains behind it. So from the global, I would say, monopolized mafia, agribusiness players, that's food control, and then we've got the water control, which we've discussed a little bit, and then we've got the medical industry control and the arms industry control. So these conglomerates are controlling, and they're pushing this geopolitical strategies because of their own interests, and ideally to trap nations. But Dajjal, when he comes, wants people to be trapped. He will move mountains of food, move with water. So these systems here are there they structurally engineered to transform, to control countries. And there are a lot of examples of that. So we just need to be vigilant, we need to be cautious, we need to see how, as people of Iman, Amal wise we preparing, and Asbab wise we are preparing. The Amal for today is to read Salat with Jama'ah, all the Salat, and more importantly, never to miss Isha and Fajr. Man Salla al-Isha fi Jama'atin, whoever reads Salat with Jama'at, Isha in congregation, فَكَأَنَّمَا قَامَ نِصْفَ اللَّيْلِ, as if he stood up in worship for half the night. وَمَنْ صَلَّى الصُّبْحِ فِي جَمَاعَةٍ فَكَأَنَّمَا صَلَّى اللَّيْلِ كُلَّهُ. And if you read Fajr, then it's as if you spend the entire night in Ibadah. وَآخِرُ دَعْوَانَا أَنِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ.